All right, so what we start with?
Jordan's got a welcome.
All right.
Well, what are we talking about?
Well, one thing I don't want to do
perfect.
that most people do is shy away from the questions you really have.
Right. Let's see. Someone had a really good question. So this was through Exodus 30 through 32. She's talking about the time whenever God told, this was after the golden calf and everything, and God told him to go in, told the Levites, the sons of Aaron, to go in and kill their brothers and neighbors. So after the Ten Commandments,
Because they were disobeying.
They made a covenant, and they did not keep the covenant, so they must die. I mean, there was a lot of...
so why was that justifiable, I guess is the question.
yeah,
There was a lot of... when God was going through all of the different specifications for certain things, and it was like, if this person doesn't do this or that does this, then they should be put to death. I mean, somebody's got to put them to death.
Yeah.
It didn't say, I will strike him down. It says he will be put to death. So somebody's got to kill him.
And he also didn't command them to like just continually kill their brother and family for the rest of their lives. Like,
so does it say, so in the Ten Commandment, is the word synonymous with murder, or is it kill? Like, because there's a difference between killing somebody and murdering somebody.
What's the difference?
Killing somebody, well, murder is killing somebody
With
without
intent.
just cause.
Yeah, we learned this Saturday. Murder means just premeditated.
Well, not necessarily premeditated, but
You have an intent. You're intending to do it. So that, in reference to what Kyle read, is saying.
What does she say? What does she use the word murder, or does she use the word kill?
kill.
There was
Well,
reason.
that's pretty much what.
What does the Blue Bible use for the?
what scripture was
Are you
that?
looking
That was
at it?
Exodus 32, right?
The Ten Commandments.
I think it was.
Well, no, the Ten Commandments. Like what?
Oh, and the Ten Commandments.
Yeah.
Commandments.
the Ten Commandments.
I believe that was
Dang, man, where are you from?
So does that
Keener.
leads me to the question: what is justifiable and what's not, or what gives you a reason and doesn't give you a reason?
Well, that's, I think, Jordan just said that, like God had just laid out all these commands saying, if this happens, this person needs to be held accountable. You need to kill that person, basically.
Right.
And he had laid out all these things, and then the Israelites were like, well, screw your law, basically. And so God was holding them accountable.
The only thing that makes it, I think, justifiable is if it's ordained by God.
Right before that, God gives the whole, do this, if this happens, eye for an eye, tooth for tooth type of thing. Mm-hmm. And when did that get lost? Because it's gotten lost somewhere between Old Testament and now.
Well, I think because in the New Testament it says, I know you've heard eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth, but I tell you this, love your enemies and pray for those who curse you.
And
was that because Jesus paid for that already?
Yeah. Well, actually, that was Jesus who said that.
Right.
But did he say that because
he was going to pay for it?
Because he was going to...
Yeah. Well, I mean, you got to think, like, that's been the arc, the trajectory the whole time.
So did, I guess, in the Old Testament, did you have more judgment to delegate than you do now because Christ has paid for those things? You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I don't know.
It's I think that's like when you start to go down this road, there's always it's never going to end with a definitive, this is the way you do it answer.
Right. Well, I mean, so one of the other examples that I can think of where God didn't have somebody killed, but he actually killed somebody because of an accident. Remember when the ark was being transported?
Oh,
And they weren't supposed to-
Aaron's sons.
Yeah.
It happened when they were moving it because it was something like
Struck him down.
stupid.
Yeah.
It was they touched it wrong or something.
Well, no, what it was about to fall off the poles. And so he went to catch it, and God killed him instantly.
Because he touched it.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to touch it.
Let it fall.
So that was a lack of faith thing to me. Like, God told you something. And however minute it is, he didn't believe that God would do what he said he was going to do, I guess.
Yeah.
This just gives me all the more reason to be like super strict with my kids. Like give them zero leeway. Like, dude, this is what I said. I said to do this, this, and this. I don't care if
You touch that, I kill you.
Yeah.
Well, see, then
I don't
that
care if
that
you did-
goes back to why we don't observe all those laws still is because you're taking the control away from God and trying to order all that stuff out now.
What were you about to read? Were you about to read what it?
I rabbit hole, man. So,
Did you find the blue letter for the 10 Commandments? That's what I
For
want to
what-
know.
for
I want to
what?
know what word was used. What
when
the,
he said, so Moses,
the murder one? Thou shalt not kill.
says,
I don't
Ten
know what
Commandments
the
are in chapter 35, right?
whoever's
So
for the Lord, come to me. And all the Levites gathered around, and we told them, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says: every man fasten his sword to his side, go back and forth through the camp from entrance to entrance, and each of you kill his brother, his friend, and his neighbor. So that's the verse that was talked about. And that was verse 27, Exodus 32:27. So in blue letter, it is
Yeah, we need to know if it uses the same word.
Exodus 32:27.
All right. Did you find the Ten Commandments in Hebrew?
It was kill. That
Pretty
word
solid.
kill is not the same thing as murder.
yeah, well, and it just why would God use murder? Why would it doesn't make any sense.
So it says the outline of the biblical usage is to murder, slay, or kill, premeditated, accidental, as avenger, slayer.
It's just
It's anything.
the usage of that word is all over the place, but the biblical principle behind what God was saying
Right.
is not that.
So the biblical principle is sanctity of life because we're created in the image of God. And so being created in the image of God, he is the only one that has rights to
So what about capital
start and
punishment?
end. That's a heavy topic. I have a lot
I
of
know.
thoughts
I
about
just went
it.
through an ethics class on this.
I've got a lot of thoughts about it.
Yeah.
So
So there's capital punishment. And then you look at the Ten Commandments, and he commanded it
Right.
several times over the course of the law, saying even down to a disobedient child
Right.
should be killed.
so are you for it or against it? Or is it
Am I
justifiable?
for capital punishment? I am for capital punishment.
Yeah, if somebody keeps doing the same thing over and over, or somebody premeditated doing something, they knew what they were doing,
and then the
and
ethics-
did it anyway.
Then the other side of the ethics argument is, well, what about the case of you got it wrong? The evidence was wrong, and you just murdered somebody.
Right.
Well, only thing I can say is if I'm the judge or in that position to have to make the decision, then I'm going to have to answer for my decisions when I meet God.
You gonna make for sure. To me. That's the only justification, is if it's this guy was caught killing that person and all the evidence is there. This is legit what happened.
And even if you're still wrong, I
Any
think
doubt.
God has grace in that whenever
Right.
you do get to go talk to him. He'll point that out to you. Hey, Nick, you remember this guy? Well, this is what really happened, but I still love you anyway.
Well, I mean, and that's
It was his time.
to
And I used it for this reason.
Right. I mean, and also to assume though that this is after this life is there's nothing. I mean, and that's false too. But that's the typical understanding of it, and so people.
I think that's why a lot of
freak
people
out.
have a problem with death is because you're not thinking about that person's not really dying. You're just sending them to
Eternity.
if they repented and believed but we're really opening up a can of worms.
I was about to say this is a really long rabbit trail.
But then, it's not for you to know a man's heart. So if I decide I'm going to go on a killing spree when I leave here, how does God deal with that? I don't think it's not for us to know.
Yeah.
Are you still under grace at that point? If it's premeditated and like I know I should not murder people and I tell God to kiss it and I still go out and murder people, then is that kind of lining up with the Old Testament?
You're breaching the surface of
Like degrees of sin.
Yeah, of whether or not we are once saved, always saved, or
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so
that's a deep
that's a
conversation.
slippery
too.
slope because
Well, not just that, but also are all sins equal?
I don't think all sins are equal.
I mean, I'll agree with you. I mean, I do
If I'm
agree.
being honest, I would love to say they are, but me eating 12 cheeseburgers is a lot different than me killing 12 people.
Right.
And to say that they're the same is just ignorant. Because we don't treat them the same.
Right.
And not just applying the world's logic to it, but just, I mean,
I didn't know eating 12 cheeseburgers was a bad thing. Just kidding.
Depends on your metabolism. If I eat 12 cheeseburgers,
depends on what you're
it's
doing
a
it for.
bad
Like
thing.
if you need the fuel to burn, then go for it. But if you're just, on the couch and like I'm not getting off this couch today, and
I'm just going to eat 12 cheeseburgers. I
Then-
like cheeseburgers a lot. Just want to feed me.
So honestly, seriously, I think this is almost a dividing line for when people stop believing,
Yeah.
because they get to this point and they can't quantify it or justify it in their mind, and they're just like, well, then I'm just going to quit.
Well, it goes to my memory verse, right?
Right.
Proverbs
Wait, which one?
1:7. Fear of the Lord is the foundation of knowledge, and fools despise wisdom and instruction. So if we don't first start with the foundation of God is God, He created this world, He gets to define the rules. He gets to lay out how everything goes, and who are we to question Him as the created? Like that's, to me, that's the crux of it. It's a presuppositional apologetic.
So then, people can't handle that, though. People can't handle with you just saying, I can handle it, I've accepted it, but you just saying you don't get to be God. You don't get to answer those things. And some things are only for God to answer, and you're just going to have to wait. And people don't like hearing it.
Yeah, people don't like obedience, period.
Right.
Because we want to be God. That's kind of the problem with humanity is people want to take on the role of God in small and large forms. And the little things of, well, I get to choose, like the cheeseburger thing. I get to choose what I eat. Like I can eat whatever I want to eat. and then you're 400 or 500 pounds, and you're like,
There's consequences.
there's
to that.
consequences
Right,
from
Consequences
because
to
God
sin.
said this is how it's supposed to be done. You know,
Right.
like you should walk things out in this manner. There's a reason for that, and if you don't follow through with that, you're going to experience the curses that come with being in opposition to God. If you do follow His plan and things, you experience the blessings that come from being in sync with God.
Right.
And to me, that's the whole thing. Like God's saying, I created this world. I knit you together in your mother's womb. I know the innermost parts of who you are, and I know everything. The other memory verse, right? The Lord of God is the word of God is alive and powerful, sharper than the sharpest two-edged sword, cutting between soul and spirit, between joint and marrow, like that, and then revealing the innermost thoughts and desires of the heart, like that. That division between soul and spirit, soul, mind, will, and emotions. Like we make all our decisions off of what we think and feel, then we're going to come up with things that are in opposition to God, that are in opposition to the spirit, because the flesh and the spirit are in contention with each other.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's exactly where my mind goes to, though, too, is like whenever that is the question, whenever you have those ethical dilemmas, really the only leg that you have to stand on is, okay, but what do we know about God?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because he's the same yesterday, today, and forever. He's not changed. His morals haven't changed. His ethics haven't changed. So what do we know about God? And we know that he's a just God, just as much as he's a loving God.
And then you got to believe that.
Right.
And your actions should follow in response. So, like when we don't believe that, then we have all those questions, right? Like if we go, you know, if we say I believe God is always and only does what is right and good, and then our actions follow. You know, my wife just got cancer. You know, like
Right.
you know that kind of situation. Like my wife just got cancer, but God always and only does what is right and good for those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. Right. If I believe that to be true, then I have to believe that regardless of the outcome, regardless of all the suffering that we experience in the physical, regardless of all of those things, God is still always and only good, and He's got a purpose for what He allowed to happen.
Right. Yeah.
And then we take ourselves off the throne and
Right.
put Him on it.
So that's one of the biggest problems that we have is we try to play God and we try to make our ethics His ethics.
Yep.
So what about the question, or, you know, I'm sure you've heard the expression of, you know, only God can judge me and I'm not the judge. And I think people sometimes use that to their benefit or to the extreme. It's not necessarily that you shouldn't judge. Paul even talks about it in his letters, and I can't remember the exact wording, but, you know, I even use that, like when people come with something that is in opposition of what God is saying, and it is easy to say, well, I'm not the judge, so you're going to have to take that up with God to not be controversial. And I think a lot of people justify that in their mind as, well, I'm just not going to judge anything because God's the judge.
But
and
also,
that's not necessarily right. I don't
right.
think.
Well, and also too, like that's just a common misquoted
Testing
verse.
and judging are not the same thing. Right?
Well, also too, like it's just a really common misquoted verse because it says everybody stops at the judge not and forgets the
lest you be judged.
lest you be judged. I've
So
memorized that in KJV. I was
Yeah.
trying to find it in
Yeah.
CSB or ESV.
Hold people to the same standard you hold yourself,
Right.
Right.
and
Right.
hold yourself to God's standard. And that doesn't mean you're judgmental. That
Right.
just means
Exactly.
you're helping people see God's principles and
And to me, that goes into like, you know, holding a standard of excellence. Like when we look at things through God's lens and the way that He designed it all, and we look at how He laid everything out. I mean, He was very specific on all of His instructions throughout the Old Testament to the Israelites of like, do this exactly this way. He had a very high standard in things, but He was also about people. And the reason why He had such a high standard is because He was all about people, because He loves people. And I think that kind of goes into some of those leadership things as far as like, when we model our leadership off of God's and we go, because I love you, Kyle, I'm not going to allow you to be late to work.
Right.
Like
That was a tough lesson to learn.
yeah. Like I'm going to call you out on it. And then I'm going to not only calling you out on it, now I'm going to encourage you and I'm going to give you some accountability, and then I'm going to come alongside and go, okay, Kyle, do I need to call you at 6:00 in the morning to make sure that you're getting ready and rolling?
See, that's where the world's like, I think the world's perception of love has got so distorted. It's more loving to point somebody in the right direction than to just say, well, I'm not the judge. You do whatever you want to.
Right.
Yeah. So, can I read that passage for you?
Yeah.
So, keeping in mind, like this is in the Sermon on the Mount. So this is I think it's the
message,
right? But it's also Jesus's sermon. Like these words are in red. So everybody stops at Matthew 7 verse 1. Judge not that you be not judged. But then there's 5 more verses. It says, for with the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but you do not notice the log that is in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye when there is a log in your own eye? You hypocrite. First take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. Okay, so that part, that's the key verse.
Get your heart right, So, Kyle, you're saying I can't call you out for being late and then keep being late myself?
Right.
What?
So, first, so there's an order there. First, take the log out of your eye. So if you call me for being 20, 30 minutes late all the time, but you're 15, 20 minutes late, you're still late, right? And so first, take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye.
Well, it's hard to tell somebody what to do if you're not doing it yourself.
Right.
And it's just,
and that's not apples for apples either. Like it's like if I'm gonna come into Kyle and go, Kyle, stop being late for things, and meanwhile I've got this big pride issue or like this big,
I'm always on time.
I've got like this massive sin that's hovering on me, and it's distorting my judgment and my view of the people around me.
Right.
Then it's not going to be perceived well from Kyle.
you can't be like, my Sunday school attendance is 100, so you can't tell me nothing.
Right. Oh man. All right, and y'all tell me what you think. The next verse 6 is do not give dogs what is holy, and do not throw your pearls before pigs, lest they trample them underfoot and turn to attack you. So this is all in the ESV, at least. It's all in the same paragraph. Mm-hmm. How's that applicable to what
So what's
we were
that
just
saying
talking
is
about?
like, even if even after you've taken the log out of your eye and are walking closer with God and know those principles, it's not up to you to make people receive them. And when you put that out there, you're immediately going to know if that person is receptive to it or not. And if they're not, don't keep poking them in the eye, pointing it out. Like, let God do that work. And
two, just taking a view of what's going on. Read the room. Like if you're going to somebody who's perceptive of constructive criticism, that looks one way. If you're going to somebody who is just like walled up and blocking everybody out and doesn't matter what you say, then don't waste your time in that. Like build the relationship first. Start, go and figure out why that person is like that.
I was going to say that doesn't mean quit loving them. That just means, you can't keep pointing something out to somebody and expecting, you can't make a person change.
Right.
Only God can, change a man's heart. And that doesn't mean quit praying for him. That doesn't mean, like, when he's talking to the disciples, or, shake the dust off your feet and move on. I think some people take that too literally and just to say to heck with that person altogether. And obviously Jesus talks a lot about loving your enemy, and whether they're an enemy to you or not, it's not just
and so you gotta look at the context there. Like, he was talking to the disciples who were going to carry the gospel message out to the world, and it was on them to go and advance it out as quickly as possible.
Yep.
Right. So it wasn't he wasn't going to a specific people group, and to like a specific town and going, just hang out here and pour into these people only. He was going, you're going from town to town and you're carrying this message. So if they reject it here, then move on to the next town and bring it there.
Yep.
It wasn't a disregard of those folks. It was just a high regard of the mission.
Yeah. I didn't mean to be confusing, but I was just thinking about, like, if that relationship is your wife or your brother or your coworkers, it doesn't mean just write them off.
Right.
And that's a big problem, man. Like, just people bailing on people, whether it be, looking at the, divorce is crazy, as crazy the numbers are on that. And then, like, just people, churches, right? Like, you go and you attend a church, and then you have a falling out with somebody, and then rather than going and resolving that, you just up and move to the next place. Like,
Yep.
You're never gonna grow beyond where you're at if you're not willing to walk through difficult things.
Right. 100%. I mean, I think that's another common misconception too, is like life isn't supposed to be easy. We're never promised an easy life. I think that's purposeful.
No, but something I hold on is God promises that he's going to be faithful. So
exactly.
The more I lean into him, it's not necessarily my life's going to get easier, but my perspective is going to get better.
Right.
And the things that you're not going to have that negative Nancy mentality or always looking at your glass half empty.
Right.
When you get cancer, if you're looking at it as God has taken me out of this circle I'm in and put me in another circle to be a light for somebody that would have never seen it otherwise.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. That happened to my mom. My mom had a rare eye cancer shortly after I moved out of the house and everything. And the whole time through that process, that was her mentality, was like, I'm going to be in front of these nurses and these doctors, and I need to be a reflection of Christ in the midst of this. And God ended up healing her of it. She's cancer free for 15, 16 years or something like that. But she saw the purpose in it, and that, and believed that God is good and he's going to do what he's got to do to.
And that doesn't mean, do something to receive a blessing. That doesn't mean,
right.
if I use something bad, that goes back to you wanting to be God and delegating what's being blessed and not being blessed. That was maybe the fruit of her obedience, but whether it was or not, I'm sure her attitude wouldn't have changed because of her heart in doing it. You don't give, whether it's time, talent, money, whatever, you don't give necessarily, you don't give to to get something. You give it because of who God is and His faithfulness, and it's a heart posture. It's not so, well, if I get cancer and I do these things this way, then God's going to heal me of it. You're not doing it for an outcome. You're doing it because of the relationship.
Right. And I think to bring it back full circle, anytime that we do have those dilemmas, you have to think back to, what do I know about God? Because we know He's good. We know He's faithful. We know that He's just. I mean, the list just continues.
The more you grow to know about who He is, the more accepting you are of the things that happen around you.
Right.
And I think that's as we talked about that a little bit last week, about just being in the Word and spending time with God. Like, spend time with Him. Get to know who He is.
So the whole year, or every message this year, Bobby has said, if you watch TV, read your Bible more. If you read books, read your Bible more. Be with God more because you think about, if you look at your day and how much time you spend with God versus how much time you get, because what you put in is what's going to come out, right? So if you spend 4 hours a day watching Netflix, which is, has the agenda of the world, then sooner or later, over time, it's going to change your perspective on things.
Right. Yeah. Got to adjust our focus. But, alrighty, y'all. Cool. This was a cool impromptu episode. So you can email either myself, Kyle, John, Nick, or Jordan at their names, like Kyle, at gatheringsurfcity.com. Or you can send us a DM on Facebook or Instagram to The Gathering, or however else you want to try to get up with us.